Hi everyone. In this module, we are going to learn about what are all the activities, documents, and process involved in the conduct phase in clinical data management. So this part we already discussed what is clinical data management. It is a process of collecting, cleaning, and management of subject data, keeping the number of errors and missing data as low as possible, and gather maximum data for analysis. What are all the three phases of CDM? Startup phase, conduct, and closeout phase. Already we have covered the startup phase. Now let us focus on conduct phase. Let us focus on what are all the process involved in the conduct phase. It includes data collection, which is also known as the data entry process, query management, import and export of data into the system and from the system, SAE reconciliation, medical coding, non-CRF data management and reconciliation of the same, quality control, source data verification and PI signature process in the system, extraction of listings or reports, interim analysis if applicable. So this process will be performed in few studies if the sponsor is willing to do it. Why they will do this process, interim analysis? They do this process to understand whether the data is analyzed as per the expected outcome. If not, they will understand what is the issue, why the expected outcome is not matching with the actual outcome. Then post-production change. In case of any amendments to the study, if that is going to impact the data collection process, then post-production change request form will be raised. Post completion of that particular form, the modification to the systems will occur. So first is the data entry, that is also called as the data collection process, which we discussed in the previous slide. So the site team is first trained on the CDC system according to the ECRF completion guideline, which is also called as data entry guidelines. Then the lead data manager or the clinical data analyst ensure that the data entered is collected properly and is complete. Data entry guideline. So it will show how to log in into the system, how to create the subjects, data entry, scheduling visits, saving the CRF, amending the saved CRF along with the reason for change. For example, if the CRF is marked as complete, if any modification needs to be performed to the same page, then you have to provide a reason for change, why the change is required. So post completion of that, if there are any discrepancies are available into the system, then that needs to be managed. Once everything is completed and the SDV process is also done, or if not done, also the investigator can sign off by providing their assurance that the data which is entered into the system. Query management. This process is also called as discrepancy management. Queries can be raised automatically or manually. So if a query is generated for the first time, it is also termed as a new query or a parent query. This query, which will have a unique query ID so that the monitors or the CRCs or the data management team can identify it. Each query is assigned to a respective designee. It could be site team or a study team or DM team. There could be 4 types of status, but just not limited to this. Every system has its own properties. So open queries are nothing but the new queries, and updated, which is where the site team or the monitors respond to that query, and closed query. Closed query is nothing but once the response received is correct, the query can be closed. Sometimes the closed query, for the closed query, the data can be modified, then that will be identified as closed and modified. Open queries, so which is mentioned as the queries which are not yet responded to it. That is the reason I said that it is a new query. Updated, which are answered, however not closed or resolved. Closed queries are queries which are resolved. If that is considered to be resolved, then the data management team or the study team can close it. Then closed and modified are queries which are modified after a resolution or which is closed. Cancelled queries are queries that are not resolved or answered but are simply deleted because they are wrongly raised. So wrongly raised queries can be cancelled. Then come to the listings and reports. So listings are the records or the reports generated during the study in which the subject data is sorted in various lists. Listings are pulled from the ADC system at regular intervals as required to ensure that the proper progress of the study and to keep a track of data which is entered. So individual CRF listings. So each CRFs also can be extracted from the system where CDA checks if all the data points are captured. If any data point is missing or incorrectly entered, it can be cross-checked with the ADC system. Based on this, the CDA can raise a query or may notify the concerned monitor that these particular data are missing or it could be an incorrect data. Missing forms. Sometimes in a particular visit, few forms may be missed or the site team forgot to enter the data entry, or sometimes genuinely those assessments could not be performed. So by extracting this process, the CDA can raise a query or notify the monitor to identify whether the forms are actually missed or the site forgot to enter the data. So let us see what is the definition which is given in the slide. Are listings which include all the CRFs that are either blank or partially completed and whose events are either scheduled or in a data entry phase. So here schedule is meant as the visits. The CDA checks the days for which the event was scheduled or data entry was started. So if it is more than the buffer period, which would be already mentioned in a guideline, so if it crosses that buffer period, then CDA may raise a query or notify the respective monitor. SDV and PI sign-off status. So SDV is nothing but the source data verification, whether the completed forms are verified, not verified, or even if the monitor verifies the form, post that if the site team modifies any data to the same that is identified as changed since verified. If the forms are changed since verified, then the site should provide a reason for change or a note to the same. So reason for change should be provided every time a data is changed after the form is completed, so that these forms should be again verified by the monitor, because so if there are any update to the form, the monitor has to acknowledge the same. Query status. Multiple listings are created to track the queries. So these queries track the number of queries raised, number of days for which the queries is open. So CDA shall requery if a previous query is not responded to a given period of time. This given period of time will vary project to project, because sometimes if it is a short duration study, then there would be a limited time. If it is a long duration study, so there could be a buffer time could be extended. So the listings also track the event name, which is also called as the visit name. CRF name is your form name, and the question for which the query was raised. That is your label of the form, that particular data item, and the data entered for that question. It also shows the status of the query and all relevant detailed information about the same. So the CDA can also track site-wise queries and overall query count of all the sites together. So what are all the listings, what are all the reports that can be extracted in terms of query management? Those includes we can extract the query detailed report, which will have an information like which form it is involved, which visit it comes to, what is the data point where this particular query is raised, what data was entered, or if it is blank, then you will have a blank data over there, and how long this data or this query is open, and when this query was raised, whether this is a system generated query or which was raised by any other site team or the study team or the data management team, and when this was raised in the system. All the detailed information will be available. And query aging by site, how long this query is open, and queries by site, so how many queries are there in a particular site, and site-wise new queries. Always the monitors or the team will be focusing on the new queries because site has to respond to the query. Then medical coding listings. So these listings track the medical coding data for all the terms recorded under the pages like adverse event, concomitant medication, medical history, surgical history, serious adverse event, etc. The CDA tracks whether the preferred term used in one form matches the term used in other relevant form for the same medical condition treatment across the study. Then data import and export. So data transfer is performed according to the data transfer guideline, which will have the information like the format of the file that will be transferred, the mode of transfer, frequency of transfer, whether it will be a cumulative data or an incremental data, description of any calculated variables, key contacts, data transfer specification document, and electronic data transfer form as well. So under which part the import will happen. So if study relevant images needs to be uploaded to the system, laboratory data in case of central laboratory. So if you're going to get the file, the same needs to be uploaded to the system, and coded terms. So once the medical coding is completed by the coder, the same term needs to be imported to the system if applicable. So when we will do the export, terms for medical coding. If the coder has to do it manually or automatically, which is not performed inside the system, then you have to export the data which concerns about the medical coding part. Then SI reconciliation. Or most of the studies will have a separate safety database, so that part needs to be reconciled. So study database as well as your safety database has to be reconciled. So that is completed through SI reconciliation process. Then listings. So it could be an individual CRF listings. Then data for analysis by statistician. So SI reconciliation. What is an SI? SI is an untoward medical occurrence that may be either life-threatening or which may require inpatient hospitalization, significant disability, or it's congenital. So if any SI occurs, first that has to be notified to the investigator at site by the subject. Meanwhile, when the patient is receiving the treatment, the SI is notified to the sponsor and then to the ethics committee within 24 hours. The SAE will be followed up until its resolution, until the subject becomes stable, asymptomatic, or if he is dead, he or she is dead. The PI will prepare reports of all the follow-up visits of the subject. Then PI and sponsor designee will prepare a detailed report on the analysis of SAE and submit it to the head of institution where the trial is conducted and to the ethics committee within 14 calendar days. So those informations has to be updated in the EDC system and on source templates wherever it is applicable. Then the data of the follow-up visits is updated in both source documents and the EDC system. Sometimes if SAE is prolonged for a period of time, then such information will not be updated in the EDC system. Then the same will be updated on the source template. It is a process in which SAE is recorded in two different databases or compact. So they include your study database and the safety database. The CTA or the medical monitor will extract a list of SAEs from the study database and they will also obtain a list of SAEs from the safety database. Both the database are also checked against the data recorded in the source template designed for the PVT. The monitor will always provide an assurance that the data which is captured in the study database and safety database are as per the source template. So CDA or the medical monitor or the monitors will ensure that all the SAEs mentioned in the study database are also captured in the safety database and vice versa. If the SAEs are not resolved and follow-up visits are not updated, then CDA or monitor will reconcile the data available until the last visit. If any discrepancies are raised during the reconciliation process, further clarifications are required from the site investigator through the EDC module where the query will be raised. Resolved queries should be reviewed by the lead data manager or the clinical data analyst, and any changes needed should be updated on study or the safety database as applicable. The same should be reconciled in the next cycle of reconciliation, because SAE reconciliation is an ongoing process till the end of the study that has to be reconciled. Medical coding or data coding is performed according to the medical or data coding guideline. The widely used dictionaries are MEDRA and WHO-DDE. MEDRA is used to code the medical condition, whereas WHO-DDE is used to code the medical treatment, that is your medication name. Apart from that, sponsor-specific licensed dictionaries or proprietary dictionaries also being used. Coding services can be provided by third-party vendors also. Data coding system must be set for auto-coding. Manual coding must be used for the terms that do not match with the dictionary or when auto-coding fails. For any discrepancies or clarification, that should be sought from the PI, and response must be reviewed by CTA or DM. So how the process occurs. So case report form or source template, the data is entered into the ADC system. So the required data is exported and sent for medical coding. If it's an exact match, then automatic coding will be performed. If there are any query or discrepancy, a clarification will be received from the investigator and resolution to those query. Then the coded data will be imported into the ADC system. If the coded data or the data which needs to be coded does not match, then manual coding will be performed. Then that query, if appears, then we have to take a clarification from the investigator. Post resolution of the same, the coded data will be imported into the system. MEDRA. The system organ class, it's just an example how the hierarchy works out. The gastrointestinal disorders, high-level group term, high-level term, preferred term, low-level term. So if you see here, the system organ class where gastrointestinal disorder is selected, then it involves the organ of the GI tract. Then nausea or vomiting is the high-level terms, the selected term, and preferred term could be nausea and feeling paresthesia, low-level term. WHO-DDE or anatomical main group, then therapeutic subgroup, pharmacological subgroup, chemical subgroup, and chemical substance. Here an example is alimentary tract and metabolism, drugs used in diabetes, blood glucose lowering drugs excluding insulin, it's bioquinides, metformin is the chemical substance. This is how the coding part will occur. Then non-CRF data reconciliation. So non-CRF data is the data that is not entered into the ADC by the site team. Site team is nothing but the hospital team. So this data is imported into the ADC from external sources. So it could be laboratory data, study-related images, or any other data which are imported into the ADC system. So it is imported to the system according to the guideline, so which is nothing but non-CRF data handling guideline. So predefined ranges can be updated from the laboratories in the startup phase. So edit checks are created and programmed based on these ranges. If the ranges are changed during live trial, it is implemented via post-production change request process, because based upon this only the queries will be filed. In case if ranges are changed often or not programmed during the startup phase, then it shall be manually reviewed during the reconciliation process. Non-CRF data is reconciled on key variables like sponsor name, protocol ID, site ID, subject number or ID, sample number, etc. Here the sample number is mentioned in case of laboratory data or imaging data, etc. The CDA shall also check for missing data. Sometimes the missing data may be that the particular data is missing during the import process, or the sample could be not processed. So such cases, the CDA will take an appropriate comment from the respective vendors. So if any discrepancy arises, it is notified to the source from which the data was imported for correction or explanation. The unresolved queries are again reconciled in the next cycle of reconciliation. Quality control process. QC will be performed according to the QC plan after every milestone during the course of the study. So it is performed on a selected percentage of fields with percentage error is calculated. So it varies from project to project. Sometimes the DM team can define their own percentage error or sponsor can also provide it. So probable errors could be a difference between the protocol and ECRF, missing data or discrepancy not raised on missing data, query resolutions not updated or wrongly updated, violation of guidelines. Due to that, the data could not be correct. So percentage error rate, where the formula used is number of errors detected divided by total number of fields press selected into 100. All discrepancies arising during the study are documented in format of a QC issue log as well as is recorded in the QC report as well. Milestones, query management, non-CRF data coding, essay reconciliation, non-critical or critical data, final QC. Source data verification. So what is it? So whenever a data is entered into the system, which is not always 100% accurate, someone needs to acknowledge the data which is entered into the system is correct. So whenever a monitor visits the site, so they will acknowledge the data which is entered the system is correct through a process called as source data verification. So how it is completed? The monitor will cross-check the data entered into the system with the data available in the source document. If clinical data analyst encounters an error in a CRF that is source verified, then the CDA will raise a query assigning it to the monitor. Once all the CRFs are completed, PI will sign off the CRF electronically. So it is called as e-signatures. So PI sign off can be done for individual visits or for all visits of a particular site. Interim analysis. Interim analysis is conducted in an ongoing trial to check the progress of the study. It is done to ensure that the study is going to yield likely outcomes. So likely outcome is always called as an expected outcome as per the protocol. If not, then it helps to identify the problem or issue and allows the sponsor to make required modifications to the protocol or any other related documents. So subject data is analyzed at a defined interval as agreed with the sponsors, wherever the number of subjects are approved by the sponsor and are selected for the analysis. The CDA will check if all the CRFs in those visits are completed, source data verified, and PI sign-off is completed. So all external data is received and reconciled. Essay reconciliation and medical coding are completed. All queries are closed. QC is performed as per QC guidelines. After the subject data is cleaned, the subjects are locked for interim analysis. Why we do the locking process for interim analysis? Because the subject data may be modified sometimes post-cleaning activity. To avoid that, the subjects are locked during the interim analysis process. So after receiving the approval from LDM, biostatistician and sponsor, the subjects are locked based on their particular visits. So then the CDA will extract this data and generate a report which is shared with the sponsor to track the progress as well as perform analysis on the study. In case if the subjects needs to be unlocked, then a database lock change request form needs to be filled and the same should be approved by the database administrator and sponsors as well. So the unlocking will be performed. Main reason could be the PI sign-off process could not be completed in the earlier stage. To complete the same, unlocking may be done. Sometimes there could be a modification of data genuinely is required. Under such conditions also unlocking are required. And if any open queries are there, then same needs to be addressed by the site team. So under these conditions, the unlocking of those subjects or the subjects linked visits could be unlocked. So if any discrepancy is encountered, addition or omission of any data points is required during the ongoing process of the study, a post-production change request form comes into picture. This we discussed in the earlier slides also. Why post-production change request is required? Because If any modification occurs to the protocol which is going to impact the study data collection, then that has to be identified through a post-production change process, so that which particular form is impacted and which data is going to be updated or a new data is involved. So these changes will be communicated to the DM team. Then DM will perform a risk and impact analysis, and then they will update the post-production change request form. So LDM, PL and biostatistician will review the same and add comments if any. So these designees will incorporate the changes and update the post-production change request form. Once it is updated, same is sent for sponsor approval. Once the sponsor approves the form, then DBA or DM designee will execute the changes and versions of all amended documents will be updated. So certain documents are involved in the process. So those documents also needs to be updated. For example, if any data is added, then your annotated document needs to be updated. If a specific information needs to be provided on collection of this, then your data entry guideline also needs to be updated. So it is not limited to these two guidelines. Rest other guidelines also can be impacted. The post-production change request form will be filed in the project. Thank you.